Maggie Sloan was just about to fall asleep when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She groaned, reaching for it in the dark. The screen glowed with an unknown number. Her heart skipped. It was past midnight. Who would call her at this hour? She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, before deciding to let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed again, indicating a message had been left. With a sigh, she pressed play. Static. A faint whisper. Then, a voice, strained and trembling. "Don't answer." Maggie bolted upright, a shiver racing down her spine. The voice sounded familiar, eerily familiar. It was her own. The next morning, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling from the night before. She played the voicemail again, but this time, it was just static. No whisper, no warning. Had she imagined it? At work, she told her best friend Lisa about the call. Lisa chuckled. "You probably dreamt it. Stress can do weird things." Maggie tried to laugh it off, but something gnawed at her. Later that evening, she checked her phone records. The number wasn't listed, no missed calls, no voicemail. She frowned, her stomach twisting. Maybe Lisa was right. Maybe it was just a dream. That night, she lay in bed, scrolling mindlessly through social media, when her phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. Her breath hitched. She muted the ringer, letting it go to voicemail. A minute later, another message appeared. Hands trembling, she pressed play. This time, there was no static, just her own voice, weak, pleading. "Please, Maggie. Listen to me. Don't answer. No matter what." The message ended abruptly. Maggie's pulse pounded in her ears. Her throat tightened. This wasn't possible. Something was very, very wrong. The calls continued every night at the same time. She never answered. Each voicemail was her voice, growing more desperate, more terrified. "Don't let it in. It's coming. Please, Maggie, listen. If you answer, it will find you. I made a mistake." I answered. "And now it's here." She stopped sleeping. Her eyes were hollow, her nerves raw. She blocked the number. It didn't help. The calls kept coming. One night, exhausted and breaking, she snapped. The phone buzzed, and before she could stop herself, she answered. Silence. Then, the sound of breathing. Ragged. Wet. A slow, guttural whisper slithered through the speaker. "Found you," Maggie screamed. The next morning, she didn't go to work. She couldn't. She sat curled up on the couch, gripping her phone, waiting. She tried calling the number back. It was disconnected. She searched online for stories of strange phone calls, but nothing matched what was happening to her. That night, she barricaded her bedroom door and sat with her back against it, phone clutched in her shaking hands. 11:59 p.m. Her phone vibrated. The same number. 12 a.m. The call stopped. Then, her phone rang again. This time it displayed a new contact name. Maggie Sloan. Her own name. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the screen. Her own name. Her own number. The ringtone drilled into her skull. Shaking, she answered. She heard herself breathing on the other end. Then, her own voice broken, whispering. "It's already in the house." The call disconnected. A creak echoed from the hallway. Maggie's breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she turned toward the door. The handle twisted. Darkness swallowed her scream. The silence in Clara's apartment was a thick, suffocating blanket. It wasn't the comforting silence of a quiet evening. It was the expectant, predatory hush that precedes a storm. Outside, the city thrummed, a distant, muffled roar. But within her walls, only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic tick of the antique clock in the hallway dared to break the stillness. Clara, a freelance illustrator, had been working late, the glow of her monitor casting long, distorted shadows across her cluttered desk. The deadline for her latest commission, a macabre illustration for a horror anthology, loomed, and she was neck-deep in rendering grotesque figures and twisted landscapes. Her phone, lying face down on the edge of the desk, vibrated. A single missed call. No number, just unknown. She frowned, a flicker of annoyance disrupting her concentration. Unknown numbers were usually telemarketers, or worse, those automated scam calls that always seemed to know just enough to sound vaguely threatening. She dismissed it with a mental shrug, returning to her work. 10 minutes later, it vibrated again. Another missed call, still unknown. This time, a prickle of unease ran down her spine. It was a strange coincidence. Who called twice in such quick succession without leaving a message? She picked up her phone, staring at the blank screen, the stark white of the call log a stark contrast to the dark, intricate sketch on her monitor. She considered calling back, but the lack of a number held her back. It felt invasive, like poking a sleeping beast. She silenced the phone, placing it face down again, determined to ignore it. The clock chimed midnight, its resonant tone echoing through the apartment. Clara stretched, her muscles protesting the hours of confinement. She decided to take a break, heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. As she stood at the sink, the cold water running over her hands, she noticed a faint, rhythmic tapping sound. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a steady, insistent beat. She paused, listening intently. It seemed to be coming from the hallway. She cautiously stepped out of the kitchen, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The tapping grew louder, a distinct metallic click. It was coming from the antique clock. She approached the clock, its ornate face illuminated by the dim light from the hallway. The tapping was coming from inside, a sharp, insistent sound. She leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. The second's hand wasn't ticking, it was jerking, stuttering, as if caught on something. Then she saw it. A small, crumpled piece of paper was wedged behind the glass face, caught in the gears. The paper was folded, and on its surface a single word was scrawled in black ink. Listen. A wave of icy dread washed over her. She pulled the paper out, her fingers trembling. The word was written in a jagged, almost frantic hand, the ink slightly smeared. She unfolded the paper, revealing more writing. They're watching. They know. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. Who were they? And what did they know? She glanced at the clock. Its ticking now a frantic, erratic rhythm, a sinister countdown. She turned, her eyes scanning the hallway, the shadows seeming to deepen, to coalesce into something else. Her phone vibrated again. Another missed call. Unknown. She snatched the phone up, her fingers shaking as she pressed the call button. Silence. Then, a voice, faint and distorted, like static filtered through a broken speaker. Clara. The voice was low, raspy, almost a whisper. It seemed to emanate from the very walls of her apartment, a disembodied echo in the silence. Who is this? She whispered back, her voice barely audible. They're here. The voice continued, ignoring her question. They're in the shadows. They see everything. The line went dead. Clara stared at the phone, her hand trembling. She felt a coldness in the air, a sense of being watched, of being hunted. She ran to the living room, switching on the lights, flooding the space with artificial brightness. The shadows retreated, but the feeling of dread remained, a heavy, suffocating presence. She checked the windows, ensuring they were locked. She peered through the curtains, but the street outside was empty, illuminated by the distant glow of streetlights. She returned to her desk, her eyes drawn to the illustration on her monitor. The grotesque figures, the twisted landscapes, seemed to stare back at her, their eyes filled with a malevolent knowing. It was as if they had come to life, as if they were watching her, judging her. She shut down the computer, the sudden darkness amplifying the silence. She grabbed her keys, her purse, and her phone, determined to leave, to escape the oppressive atmosphere of her apartment. As she reached the door, her phone vibrated again. Another missed call. Unknown. She ignored it, her hand shaking as she turned the doorknob. But the door wouldn't open. It was locked, even though she knew she hadn't locked it. Panic surged through her. She tried the doorknob again, twisting and pulling, but it remained stubbornly locked. She banged on the door, her voice rising in a desperate cry. "Let me out!" The tapping sound from the clock echoed through the apartment, growing louder, more insistent. It was joined by another sound, a soft scraping, like nails on glass. She turned, her eyes widening in horror. The antique clock was vibrating, its pendulum swinging wildly, its glass face rattling. The paper inside was moving, the words shifting, changing. "They're inside," the paper now read. "They're coming for you." The scraping sound grew louder, coming from the windows. She turned, her heart pounding in her chest. The curtains were moving, swaying slightly, as if stirred by a phantom breeze. She backed away, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. The shadows seemed to writhe, to coalesce into shapes, indistinct but menacing. Her phone vibrated again. Another missed call. Unknown. She picked it up, her fingers trembling as she answered. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Clara." The voice rasped, closer this time, as if it were in the room with her. "They're here. They're in the walls. They're in the shadows. They're in your mind." The voice was coming from everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from the very air she breathed. The lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed across the walls. The tapping sound from the clock grew louder, more insistent, a frantic, rhythmic beat that echoed the pounding of her heart. The windows rattled, the scraping sound intensifying. The curtains billowed, revealing dark, indistinct shapes pressed against the glass. She screamed, her voice a raw, desperate cry. She ran towards the kitchen, searching for a weapon, a means of defense. As she reached the kitchen, the lights went out, plunging the apartment into darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of her phone screen, illuminating the missed calls, the unknown numbers that filled the call log. The tapping sound from the clock grew deafening, a relentless metallic beat that echoed through the darkness. The scraping sound from the windows was now a grating, tearing sound, like claws on glass. She heard a soft whisper, a breathy, almost inaudible sound coming from behind her. "Clara!" She turned, her eyes straining to see in the darkness. She saw a shape, a dark, indistinct form, moving towards her, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. She screamed again, her voice lost in the deafening rhythm of the clock and the grating sound of the claws on the glass. The shape moved closer, its form becoming clearer, revealing a grotesque figure. Its face twisted and contorted, its eyes filled with a dark, insatiable hunger. It reached out, its hand, long and skeletal, reaching for her throat. She closed her eyes, bracing for the impact, for the cold, crushing grip. Then, silence. The tapping stopped. The scraping ceased. The voice was gone. She opened her eyes, her breath catching in her throat. The grotesque figure was gone, vanished into the darkness. She stood there, trembling, her body shaking with fear. The silence was heavy, oppressive, a suffocating blanket that pressed down on her, threatening to crush her. Her phone vibrated again. A new missed call. Unknown. She stared at the screen, her eyes wide with terror. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that they were still there, watching her, waiting for her to make a move. She knew that the missed calls were not just missed calls. They were warnings. They were a countdown. They were a promise. A promise that they would return. And when they did, there would be no escape. The clock began to tick again, its rhythmic beat a slow, deliberate countdown. The darkness deepened, the shadows growing longer, more menacing. And Clara waited, her heart pounding in her chest, her eyes fixed on the darkness, waiting for the next missed call.